Phil, thank you so much for taking the time to chat and hang out a little bit here on Zoom and sharing a bit of your story. You'll have
No
seen
worries.
last week's one with Bonte, where we're kind of introducing it and talking a little bit about faith stories and the power of hearing stories. And I think particularly in this time, just so nice to be able to hear what's been going on in people's lives, how their lives have been turned upside down, why they're a Christian. Seemingly a bit of a bizarre title for someone these days. It just, more and more people are thinking, well, I've never met a Christian, or I don't really know many Christians, and are they not a bit weird? So to have a cool pink t-shirted dude who is like, yeah, I'm a Christian, might seem a bit odd. So Phil,
It'd be
tell us
good.
a bit about that.
I guess I was always somebody who was interested in kind of the deeper questions of life and interested in uh, kind of ideas of faith and things like that. So I was the sort of guy who, it sounds fairly tragic to admit it now, but, when you get to kind of 1 a.m. at the kind of tail end of the house party, everybody a bit worse for wear. I was the guy who'd be in the corner with the group of people who'd be talking about the meaning of life. That was kind of the sort of guy that I was, and so that kind of persisted, I suppose, throughout my teenage years. And then I think just towards the end of my teenage years, I have a younger brother and sister who are quite a bit younger than me, and they, because of our family situation, which changed, they weren't going to church at all. They had never really gone to Sunday school or anything like that. And it's a fairly strange thought for a guy in his late teens to think, but I kind of thought that there was something wrong about this, that actually, somebody should take them along. And because, even if it's not true, which I didn't really think it was, I thought it was at least interesting enough and important enough that people should at least have some awareness of what this thing is about. So I started to take them along and stick them in the Sunday school, and I used to sit in the church service while they went out to the Sunday school and listen. And to be honest, I found it very confusing, because it seemed a lot of what I heard, and it may just have been how I was hearing it, rather than what was preached. But it seemed like what I was hearing is that most weeks the message boiled down to a few points, and the first point was this: that the world is a terrible place, and I was quite interested in news and media and stuff like that, so I could readily accept that actually there were a lot of problems with the world. And then the second point was always kind of more personal. It was actually, and part of the reason why the world is a mess is because you're a mess. And I kind of thought, well, actually I can to some extent accept that too. There's lots of things, lots of habits I have and things that are going in my life, which I'm not necessarily proud of. But what can you do? This is about as good as I can be. And then the third point in the message was always, so what we really need to try to do is be nicer to one another, and just keep coming back and keep trying to be nice. And I found that so frustrating, because I thought, gosh, I feel like I'm trying here, and it's not making any difference. I'm not kind of resolving any of these kind of inner struggles, or I don't feel like I'm particularly at peace with myself. And the other thing that I thought was, I was kind of confused, because I didn't really think that Christianity was necessarily true at that point in my life. But what was obviously historically the case was that this message, this man Jesus, had completely reshaped the world. And where we are in the world right now is utterly inexplicable without an understanding of the Christian message. And I thought, this can't be it. this cannot be the Christian message. It seemed kind of so unlikely that the message of you're not a very nice person, but try harder to be nice. It seemed inconceivable to me that could turn the world upside down or reshape culture in the way that it had, because it wasn't reshaping me. It wasn't changing me. Yeah. And so that kind of brought me really to the end of my teenage years. And when I was at university, between third and fourth year at university, I wanted to see a bit of the world. The previous summer, I'd worked in a kind of homeware shop, and it was a depressing summer. I was mainly tasked with replenishing the scented candles aisle, and it was deeply depressing. And so I wanted to get out of Glasgow and see about the world, and I'd always wanted to see a kind of culture that was completely unlike my own. And so I wanted to go somewhere in Africa, and I wanted to go with some kind of organization in the hope of actually not just kind of turning up like a tourist, although to some extent I think I probably did that in the end.
It's pretty tough way to go incognito, I think, Phil.
Well, indeed. And so I signed up with an organization, and on the front cover of the organization there was a person doing a bungee jump, and it had some kind of slogan like "Go for it," or seize the day or something. And I thought, this is it. This is exactly what I want. And there were lots of information about the kind of projects that they were involved in, but there's this little thing in the inside cover that was about church and about faith and about Jesus. And I thought, well, that's fine, because I'm vaguely interested in these kinds of things, and God is a little box like that on the inside of my life. And so this will be fine. And I also kind of thought, well, if there are people who have got some kind of faith, then they're probably not going to just abandon me in the middle of the Kalahari Desert or something like that. So I felt a little bit more confident as a kind of fairly naive 20-year-old in signing up with this. So I went there, and what was immediately clear to me, even in the training in England before we even flew out, was that I was in way over my head. I had absolutely no idea what I'd signed up to, because I encountered people who were talking about Jesus in a way that I could not relate to at all. I mean, for me, Christianity was something that you kind of turned up for on a Sunday, and you did your best to be a nice person. That was it. But here, what happened was I encountered people who could say things like, that was the year I became a Christian, or sometimes that was the month. Or sometimes even people said that was the day I became a Christian. I gave my life to Jesus on that day. My life changed at that moment, and I had never encountered people talking about that, talking that way about Jesus. But what it immediately did is it meant that there was something to this that I felt I must have missed, because that didn't even seem possible in the way I was thinking about faith. And I went out with this group out to Zimbabwe. We went initially to Zimbabwe, and we were involved in a project in Zimbabwe, a kind of home that worked with street kids. And what's really interesting, and I think this is a really important thing which I've reflected on over the years, is that anytime anybody gets involved in one of these organizations, you in our kind of very kind of unpleasant, I think increasingly, I think this idea that you're going to kind of go and do good in any kind of community like that, And really, one of the things that happened to me that year was, and that summer, was I realized that I had almost nothing of benefit to share. But what I received was utterly life-changing. I learned and received inordinately more than I could ever have given. And what happened was, every morning between 8 and 9 in the morning in this street kids home, you had this time that they called the devotions, the morning devotions, and they would kind of sing and dance and pray and praise God and talk about Jesus every morning for an hour. And there was a brothel next door to this home, and the prostitutes in the morning would open their windows and smoke their cigarettes and listen and watch these little kids singing and dancing and praising Jesus. And I just I didn't know any of the words. They were singing in Shona. I had no idea really what they were singing about, but I stood among them, just in the middle of them, like the whitest man in Africa, shuffling from one foot to another, like an awkward kid at a school disco, and I thought, or what I felt was poor, interestingly, and it was in that sense it was a humbling experience, because I've kind of grown up in relative affluence, considerable affluence, and on a material level I didn't really want for anything, but here I was among kind of genuinely poor and children who often had really harrowing stories to tell, and yet in their presence I felt impoverished, because it seemed to me that they had something that was so precious and so valuable that I would have given everything if I could have had it. And what they had was God. They had a faith, and because of that faith, it seemed to me they had a joy, and they had a hope that that was completely absent from my life. And so I had that kind of 2 week. It's interesting this, because I had that kind of 2 week experience that created an incredible hunger in me, but I didn't move that quickly to well, what do I do? It was a kind of more organic process than that, and then after we left Harare, we went to Mozambique, and we worked with there's an American kind of missionary guy there who was working again with orphan kids this time, often orphan kids, and he was a kind of slightly maverick individual, and a kind of wild. He had a big beard and long hair. He looked like John the Baptist. His name was actually John, and he was a kind of slightly kind of spiky, slightly awkward guy, but an amazing man. And he liked to kind of slightly ruffle up and challenge all these kids who came to visit him. And so on the first night, or maybe the first or second night that we got there, we used to have these kind of like meals together. And he said, I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to give you some time to think about it, but I want to ask you a question, and it's this. He said, what is the difference that Jesus makes in your life that makes you different from maybe others in the world who haven't had that experience of Jesus? And of course, I hadn't had that experience of Jesus. So I had no idea how to answer that question, and really no idea what he was talking about. But it's a great question
Mm.
for somebody who is a new believer or thinking about being a believer, because it really gets to the heart of what it means to give your life to Jesus. And again, I didn't get the answer quickly, and nobody's provided me with the answer. I had time to ruminate and think and ponder. And about a week later, he led us in a Bible study. I think it was maybe on Romans 6 or something like that. And he spoke about, he said, here's the thing, human beings are slaves to sin, in the same way that Israel were slaves to Pharaoh. It's like, when the Hebrews were in Egypt, Pharaoh would say, today you make bricks, today you build a pyramid, today you can rest, but their lives were completely defined by this tyrant. And what happens is that Moses came along and through the power of God brought the Hebrews out from under Pharaoh through the Red Sea, which is kind of like a baptism, and out and into the Promised Land. So that's a picture in some senses of what happens with Jesus, that our lives are kind of defined by this kind of tyrannical force, really, that we are actually complicit with, sin, and we need a rescuer. We need somebody to bring us out. And that I had never heard anybody talk that way before, but I knew immediately that it was true, because it seemed to me to be self-evidently true of my life, that actually I had tried to be a better person. I had heard people exhort me to be better, but I never managed it.
Mm.
And here was somebody who was saying, actually, you have a problem, but Jesus can fix it. And so immediately after that Bible study, which blew my mind, he kind of said, I suppose you might want to take a moment to pray or something like that. So he went in to fix dinner, and we all kind of split off into different places in the kind of compound that we were on. And I sat down under a mango tree, as it happens, and I just bawled my eyes out. And I prayed. I mean, I'd prayed the Lord's Prayer in Sunday school, and I'd, been involved in times where people had led prayers and stuff like that. But I mean, I prayed for the first time in my life, because I knew I was talking to someone.
Yeah.
And I just said I said, Jesus, I believe you're there, and I believe you know me, and I know that I am making a right royal mess of this, but I want you to do what you can do. I want you to change me. I know I need you to change me. And it was I got up maybe 20 minutes later or something like that, and it was a very strange thing. I think the only way I can describe it is that the world looked different. Like I felt different, and the world looked different. It was a really profound, radical experience where I knew that I had met God, and I knew that someone beyond myself had become involved in my life in a way that I hadn't previously experienced. And
Beautiful.
but I still wouldn't necessarily know how to kind of put words to it at that point. But looking back, 8th of August, that was 2001. That was my moment.
Love it. And that moment that God obviously turned the lights on, in a sense, for you, meant that everything that had been leading up to that point, I guess, began to make sense, right? You start to work out and go, and even just hearing your story now, it's amazing, this journey of faith that actually you had been on, even though you didn't know God, but there was a kind of pursuit, a kind of trying to work out what does it mean to live life to its full or whatever, and actually eventually finding him in that place. And actually he found you in many ways, and it's so wonderful to hear your story. And we'll hear another one soon, so probably get another one in next week.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Bye.